This is part 2 of the Tamiya Avante 2011 build series. So this is only just a couple of steps after the part 1 and part 1A. Basically, the gear differentials are assembled and installed front and rear. So in both the front and rear gearboxes, the gear is installed from the bottom. So this is the idler gear here. And this is the gear diff, so you just put those in the bottom, and then there's 3 screws to screw on the bottom cap. And then in the front gearbox, it's basically the same thing, except the cap screws on with 4 screws instead of 3. And you have a, let's see if we can get some better lighting here. There's the center drive shaft runs into this bit here that goes to a bevel gear that feeds into another bevel gear to an idler gear, and then an idler gear feeds into the differential. Okay, the idler gear is pivots or it rotates on a shaft that you insert through a hole in the side of the gearbox here, and you have to put a little bit of tape there over that hole just to hold that shaft in, and you don't get to remove that tape until much later on in the assembly process, where you have basically the vast majority of the front suspension assembled, a particular unit that goes in this bit here, and that just kind of holds that pin in place, and you can take the tape off. Of course, you use Tamiya's famous ceramic grease here to lubricate the gears. So I got a whole bunch of it going on in there. Couple of things to note. I was thinking a bit about the motor mount and how I might be able to take the motor out more easily. I may have mentioned in the Black Special video series how adjusting either the gear mesh or otherwise working on the motor can be difficult when the chassis is fully assembled, but that's actually not the case. I was wrong about that. So if we just imagine with the top plate on here, you have 6 screws in to the front gearbox and 4 to the rear gearbox that it would take to just mount this upper deck. Okay, now there is not very much space between the upper deck and the motor, so if you wanted to pull, if you took this screw out here and the bottom screw out to undo the motor mount and pull the motor out, there's no space. But that's not how you would pull the motor out, actually. It turns out that you take those screws out and the motor just kind of tilts down and comes out from the bottom. Because as you can see, the motor is already tilted down. And I can't show you with just one hand, but it actually does pretty easily come out if you just rotate it down and pull it out from the bottom. So that makes me a little less wary about continuing with this build, because again, you know, this motor is a placeholder until I get my brushless system in, and you know, I was afraid that if I built the whole thing by then, I'd have to take a bunch of it apart just to get this out. But that's not the case, so that's good. The other thing is, after putting together at least portions of the front and rear gearboxes, you start on part of the rear suspension linkage here. So this is just it's a plastic bit here, and then one of the metal ball joints, and then there's basically a screw. It's just a single thread or a piece of threaded metal. That's the centerpiece here, and then you have a little nut. So these metal ball joints, and you get a whole bag of them right here, okay? This one you can screw in all the way, and it kind of stops at some point, and then you just screw this nut in to just tighten everything down, and then you screw this plastic guy on, and you stop when this gap here is 5.5 millimeters. Do it on both sides, and then the way it mounts, you have these 2 conical metal pieces here. Each of these is threaded all the way through, and then there's a single screw that goes all the way up and holds everything in place. Now the screw that comes with the kit, the stock screw, is a 23 millimeter screw, as you can see right here. Actually, maybe you can't see the text. It says 23 millimeters right there, okay? And that screw is supposed to end up around here. Now, the longest screw that comes with this kit, and also, by the way, the longest screw that comes with the hex head screw set that I use for the Avante Black Special, those are only about 21, maybe 22 millimeters. So they only go up to maybe here or so. But there's still enough thread left over to screw in this top conical piece here. And it doesn't mean that it's not as well fastened because, again, this piece is threaded the whole way through, which means that when you mount the upper deck, like this, there's a hole. Oops. This hole right here, I think this one or this one, I think it's this one. You put a screw through that, and it screws into the top part of this conical piece from the other side. So that the screw that comes with this screw kit is only about 21 millimeters or so, is not a big deal for that. So this is what I have so far. I just wanted to go over the motor thing because I think that was a significant error that in judgment that I had over, I guess, the last time I talked about it in this video series. The other thing is moving forward, the very next step is the center differential. So this is an interesting center differential because it's the first chassis where I've seen a ball type center diff. You could even call it a slipper clutch technically, because in some of the older like RC10 chassis, the slipper clutches at that time didn't have slipper pads. They were actually like a ball diff or a ball type of slipper. So you could argue this is some kind of a slipper, but it's also technically a center differential, and you can tighten or loosen it depending on how much, you know, coupling or decoupling you want to do with the front and rear gearboxes. So that's kind of neat. Of course, as you may already know, in more modern four-wheel drive chassis that have center differentials, like A-scale buggies, like this VE8, those center diffs are gear diffs and they're fluid filled. So this is just different and it's kind of neat. So I'm going to do this next and then get through, you know, mounting this into the gearbox. And then after that, I guess we mount the upper chassis plate here. And then close off the top of the rear gearbox, adding in another gear there, and then we get started on the rear suspension in a more involved fashion. So I'll go through a couple more steps and make another video.